a LitHub Radio podcast.
Hey everyone, most of you have probably absorbed the fact that we launched a new community, which is a companion to this podcast in a sense. It's called Memoir Nation. And Brooke, I'm not sure if people know that we're doing monthly classes, but we are, and we're signing on some super exciting guest teachers.
We certainly are. And we want to invite listeners to go take a look at our website, memoirnation.com, especially because coming right up this week is Carroll Wallace, who wrote a gorgeous memoir called Another Word for Love. And Carroll is not as well known a writer as our last guest teacher, Maggie Smith, but he should be. I have seen him perform and teach. And when we were in conversation with him, Grant, I was just awed. He is an amazing human being. We both loved his memoir. It is so cohesively wound around his theme of love. And so we asked him to come teach on that, the cohesive power of theme.
Yeah, and his thoughts on love changed my thoughts on love. He's just such a moving speaker and a moving thinker, and he's just eloquent and interesting, and he's an expert theme weaver, as you said, and he was definitely one of my favorite guests of our last season, if not the entire podcast history, the 7 years we've been doing this. And now seems like a good moment to plug some more of the teachers in our lineup. We've got Gina Frangello coming up in December, another fantastic writer and teacher, and she is followed by, can we have a drum roll? Amanda Knox. Yeah, thank you for the drum roll. Amanda will be teaching about reclaiming your story, which is a big theme for us. And we have others too. So please take a look at our classes page on memoirnation.com.
And we will have these classes every single month. They're going to be $49. And if you choose to become a member, it comes with every single class, which is a pretty great deal. I am feeling very good about the caliber of our courses and our teachers, and that is only going to continue. These kinds of classes are like a little shot of inspiration once a month on topics that will be helpful no matter what stage your writing is in. So please come visit us at memoirnation.com, join the community, take a look at the class page, come to Carroll's class on Tuesday, November 4th at 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern.
We hope to see you there. I will be there, definitely. Hello, excavators, spelunkers, truth searchers, and truth tellers. I'm Grant Faulkner, and I'm here with my co-host, Brooke Warner. And Brooke, I have to say, we've had an amazing string of guests on the show in the last 6 months or so, both in terms of great writers and celebrities and overall just, big literary figures. And we have actually an amazing string of guests coming, but today we might have the single most historically significant guest we've ever had on the show, Carroll. And I'm just so honored that we get to talk to her and hear her story.
That's right, Grant. Carroll is with us today, and is really just an amazing person in so many ways. And one of those ways is that she had the bravery, the fortitude, the chutzpah, and even the humor to take on Donald Trump in court and win 2 times. Let's not forget that. Her memoir is called Not My Type. It came out not too long ago, and yet it's been out a while, and it's still, continuing to make waves and find readers, which is great. And it details her trial against Trump, in which he was found liable for sexual abuse and defamation. We should remember that that is a truth twice. It was also very significant in part because she won so big, winning a huge $83.3 million because she did claim that Donald Trump damaged her reputation by calling her a liar after she accused him of sexual assault. It was actually the second time that a jury returned a verdict related to Carroll's claim that a flirtatious chance encounter with Trump in 1996 at the Bergdorf Goodman store ended violently. People will remember this story if you're paying attention to the news at all. She did say that Trump slammed her against a dressing room wall, pulled down her tights, and forced himself on her, which I have to say is very on brand for what we know about him. And if she ever gets the money, because, I have to say I have my doubts, but she has said that she will give it all away, which is undoubtedly a gesture, to show her critics that she's not only doing this for the money, which is what some people have claimed. But of course, her critics are claiming all kinds of stuff. And if you read the book, you know that she did not do it for money, but instead it was a truly valiant effort to bring to light the predatory nature of this man who is currently holding the highest position of power in this country, Grant. So,
yeah, my admiration for E. Jean just only deepened by reading her memoir, because she's just so smart and spirited and funny and, just fundamentally brave in the end, and brave because, she not only had to face her own trauma that she's carried with her for nearly 30 years since Trump assaulted her, but she's, brave enough to take on, one of the most powerful people in the world. And he's not only just rich and powerful, but he's backed by this crazy online mob of followers who are definitely capable of violence. And, it's just easy to forget that E. Jean will have to live the rest of her life essentially looking over her shoulder because of the retribution or revenge that some of them seek. And, what was interesting as a reading experience, though, is that E. Jean, in this book, a very serious book, she's also funny and snarky and even somewhat breezy in describing the court case. And she just definitely doesn't play the victim at all. She doesn't pity herself in any way. And she doesn't even probe her pain too deeply, except to say that she never had sex again after that experience. She lost the capacity for the trust and the tenderness of intimacy. So the pain had to run deep, even if she doesn't want to fully examine that part of her experience. She says that she's the kind of person who moves on from situations, and you feel her drive to be a survivor and a thriver no matter what throughout the book.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because the book is E. Jean's story, like any memoir, but it's her story as told through the lens of the trial. The book starts with her being examined by Trump's lawyer, Alina Habba, who is asking about her romantic life and asking details about every man she's ever had sex with. And the goal, of course, is to humiliate her on the stand. And that's one other thing that this book made clear, Grant. It's why it's so hard for women to come forward with sexual abuse claims, because they have to prove why they're not guilty, or even to prove somehow that they're not sexual, even though they're the ones who have been violated. Women have to prove that they somehow, didn't ask for it. And there's a word for what the media does to women in our culture who have to endure this kind of public scrutiny if they dare press charges against their perpetrator, and that is called slut shaming, when really the only person who should be shamed is the violator. And the book covers how EJ had to plan the way she looked in trial. I mean, it's so mirrored, some of the criticism that Amanda Knox got. And there's some, very different, but kind of similar situation when you're publicly on trial like that. E. Jean had to look appropriately attractive and young, since Trump had said, she's not his type, the title of the book, Not My Type. And then also it was clear that Trump's lawyers certainly had a template for what the appropriate response to being raped should be. They tried to use the fact that E. Jean didn't scream as evidence that she was making the whole story up. And this is what women face in sexual abuse and rape trials. And this whole notion that they have to prove themselves with another person's checklist of what they should have done is just so challenging. And if you open your eyes to it, you really can't unsee that.
Yeah, it's interesting how we're kind of culturally trained or wired to look for the flaws in the woman's story. And I think that's because there's this long history of legal cases that track exactly that. And that was very instructive to me when reading this book. I know how tough it is for a woman to charge a man with rape, of course, but this book really brought home how emotionally stressful it is. And I think when Me Too first happened and a lot of women charged men with sexual abuse from years ago, the response of many, and many men certainly, and sometimes me as well, I have to confess, was why they didn't report this when it happened. But of course, it's just not that simple. I mean, there are plenty of reasons not to trust the judicial system. You're laying your life on the line, physically, psychologically, and financially. And then there are the consequences the world delivers to you beyond the trial. Like reading this book, it made perfect sense why E. Jean would just try to move on, and also why she didn't scream, which was, central to the case. The whole time Trump was attacking her, which was a total of 3 minutes, she was fighting him off, and she clutched her purse, and Trump's lawyers relentlessly questioned her about that as well, how she didn't let go of her purse while being attacked. But screaming isn't always the reaction one has to an attack like this. Her reaction was just to fight him off and not scream him off. And clutching her purse was just certainly part of her fright and, her defense. So it was obviously an unconscious response.
Absolutely. And E. Jane's story is actually part of maybe a subgenre of memoir. I will say, unfortunately, we recently recorded and posted an all things memoir video, which is something that we're doing as an outgrowth of this podcast and posting on YouTube. And we hope that people will go check our YouTube channel because we're posting a lot of videos up there. And we're tracking things that are happening in the culture. And we called these kinds of memoirs public reckoning memoirs. And famously, before Not My Type, I mean, there have been many, but I want to name Know My Name by Chanel Miller, who is the survivor of the sexual assault from the former Stanford swimmer Brock Turner. I loved that book, Grant. It was just such a good one. And anyone who hasn't read it should go back and read it. She's a beautiful writer. And we also categorized the late Virginia Giuffre's book, Nobody's Girl, that is just out. That was what we chose to focus that little video clip on. And I think all of these and others like them are such important memoirs. They're important to other survivors. They're important to readers. And honestly, they're important to the public, even when justice doesn't get served.
Yeah, and I also think E. Jean's story fits into the theme of reclaiming, which has been a theme that's touched us both recently and was especially sparked by our episode with Amanda Knox. And it seems to me that, we're at this inflection point, a point in history where we're going to hear more stories like this by people who have either buried or hidden abuse from the past. And it's actually less of an inflection point than an inflection era, perhaps, because it seems like we've been working through this culturally for at least the last 30 years or so. And yet we've still got a ways to go, obviously. So Brooke, I want to know, what are your thoughts about telling untold stories as it relates to what I'll call our cultural evolution?
Yeah, I guess all that can be said is that if and when these survivors don't come forward, their stories are buried inside of them and then ultimately die with them. Thank God Virginia Giuffre had already started her book and had already been working with her ghostwriter, Amy Wallace, for 4 years. And even though her story ends so tragically with her death by suicide in April, this story lives on and is being published and we can read it. And these kinds of stories aren't unique to sexual victims, by the way. I want to put Navalny into this category. He was an enemy of Putin's and ended up murdered. To remind listeners, Alexei Navalny announced his campaign to oppose Putin in 2018. He gained a large base of support, especially among younger Russians. And then the Russian government under Putin barred him from appearing on the ballot, citing a criminal conviction that was widely seen as politically motivated. And then he was imprisoned and murdered. Somehow Putin remains in power. However, amazingly, his memoir survived him thanks to his partner, and he was writing some of that in prison. And so these are really important critical texts because they speak truth to power. And I guess my hope is that someday some future generation will look back on these horrid leaders like Putin and Trump, and we can put Netanyahu in this category as well. And they'll say, these people were rapacious, violative leaders. And we do have a lot of firsthand accounts of what they have done to people.
I know. Thank God for E. Jean's memoir. I can't imagine historians 100 years from now looking back and not having that. And I'm sure there are other stories out there that will keep surfacing. And Brooke, this is obviously a book about a super tough subject, and you're right. It will definitely stand the test of time, and it'll live on past E. Jean and will always be, part of that public testimony. But I know this is an odd thing to say about a book about a defamation and a sexual assault trial, but E. Jean just made this book fun. And I think that's because she can't resist seeing the world as a fun place to be. And that's inspiring in its own way. There are many different responses to a traumatic event. And she chose this, buoyant, lively response for the most part.
Yeah, I read that E. Jean called her memoir a funny book, a good beach read, while at the same time saying that it is also a call to arms. It's about sparking women's fire to once again stand up and not let men keep running this country. So it's fundamentally a feminist memoir. I can't wait to talk to her, honestly. I mean, one thing I know about E. Jean is that she is always interesting. Buckle up, folks, because we're going to have a spirited conversation after this break.
Well, Brooke, I'm always so pleased when we have a sponsor whose products and services I've actually used and enjoyed independently. And that's the case with Gotham Writers Workshop. I took my first class with them nearly 20 years ago. and it was an online class, my first online class ever. And I had my MFA at the time, and I have to say that my Gotham class was as good as any of my MFA classes. And in fact, the great writer Manuel Gonzalez taught it. But it wasn't just about Manuel. All of the students in the course were super smart and really good writers. And amazingly enough, I'm still in touch with some of them. So I wholeheartedly recommend taking any of Gotham's courses.
I love that so much. And Gotham definitely has a high pedigree, and it's been around for a long time. They offer creative writing classes in New York City, but also over Zoom, and also asynchronous classes that you can take online. And so you can be anywhere in the world. And they have an amazing breadth of offerings, Grant. They offer memoir classes, woohoo, but also other nonfiction, as well as fiction, poetry, songwriting, and many others, and with super qualified instructors and for an affordable price.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, they are very much about community, so you can stay involved with Gotham in a number of ways, and they even put on conferences. And writers often ask me how to find a writing group or a beta reader, and I think taking a class is a great way to find good writing partner matches. So develop your craft and join a vibrant community of writers at Gotham Writers Workshop.
Yes, you can find them at gothamwriters.com to see what classes are starting. Use our code, please, Memoir Nation at checkout for $40 off your first 6 or 10-week class. Some restrictions apply there, but definitely go check it out. And so endorse them, Grant.
Yeah. So one more time, visit gothamwriters.com to see what classes are starting soon, and use the code Memoir Nation, all one word, Memoir and Nation with no space between them, at checkout for $40 off your first 6 or 10-week class. Some restrictions apply. And tell them that Grant sent you, and Brooke too. Welcome back, everybody. I can't tell you how honored we are to have E. Jean Carroll on the Memoir Nation podcast today. And by way of introduction, I'm going to do this in 2 parts. I want to guide listeners to go to E. Jean's website so that you can check out her bio, which is one of the best author bios I've ever seen. And that's because she presents her life in 11 pictures, which I wish we could show you all, but I do recommend you go there. And beyond those 11 pictures, though, E. Jean Carroll is a journalist and the author of 5 books, including a biography of Hunter S. Thompson. She's written for Rolling Stone, Outside, Vanity Fair, Esquire, New York, and The Atlantic. She was named one of Time's most influential people in the world in 2024. And perhaps more importantly, though, she throws the ball for her dogs at her cabin in the mountains in upstate New York. And E. Jean, you're in the company of 2 people with problematic dogs who would love to join you in some dog throwing. So welcome to Memoir Nation.
How fabulous. I'm also with 2 people who have excellent glasses on.
We all do, yes. We all have excellent glasses.
This is fabulous. Now, Grant, can I ask you a question?
You can.
I know what Brooke is going to say.
Okay.
Do readers and listeners and your followers send you notes about your glasses? Because I know they do for you, Brooke. I know they do.
Guests comment, but we are audio. And so we have to take a photo and make sure to put the photo on social and then ask for compliments.
Okay. So.
Well, E. Jean, I'm going to ask you a question right back there, because it seems that you think Brooke's glasses are better than mine.
Well,
so the question was to me.
He has a fragile ego, E. Jean, so.
Yeah. I like to keep up with Brooke.
Well, what happens is my friends, who all wear giant glasses now, and they're on TV, and what they receive are comments constantly about their glasses. And I'm wondering if this is just a thing now, that people are getting comments on their glasses. Because Brooke's glasses are ace.
They're really good. I'll concede Brooke's are better than mine.
There are fabulous glasses. And yours, you look like who you are, Grant.
I hope so.
A writer, a substantial intellectual.
I like that.
That's your deal.
That's what I'm going for. That's my deal.
Okay.
And I'm glad you used the word fabulous, because I was going to ask you how you're doing, but I know you're fabulous. That's part of the E. Jean Carroll brand.
That's it. I got into a big trouble for always saying I was fabulous, because when we got to the trial, the first trial with Donald Trump, is the defense attorney, Joe Tacopina, who's shaped like Popeye and has a voice like a shotgun. He laid me out in front of the jury for saying that I felt fabulous, because how can she feel fabulous when 27 years ago she was attacked by Donald Trump. That was their case. That was their old-timey 16th century case. If I'm fabulous, if I'm saying I'm great, if I, went to a party and laughed and having a good time, that proved that I could not have been assaulted by the president. Can you imagine anything more old-timey than that? Women who are assaulted should be in their house covering their heads with a dishcloth and never going out, never having a career, never seeing their friends. It was absurd. So thank you for asking, Grant.
We're going to dig into a lot of those issues, Eugene, but I wanted to start, since this is a podcast for writers, and I think you're fundamentally a writer, and I want you to have that identity more than any sexual assault by the president. I've read that you tried for 25 years to make it as a writer, and you faced, innumerable rejections, as we all do. So can you tell us about your journey as a writer and how you just kept persisting?
Grant, I tell you, I am puzzled by that, because I sent off my first letter to a major publisher. It turned out to be the Sears and Roebuck catalog when I was 12. I sent them a story pitch, and the story was a little girl cut out all the clothes in Sears and Roebuck, and lo and behold, they became real when they arrived. So I sent that pitch. I didn't hear back from them. And from that time on, for the next 25 years, I sent story pitches, ideas for articles, poems, plays, quizzes. I kept the U.S. mails flooded with my pitches. I just knew I wanted to be a writer, and I could write, but I could not convince the editors, the big time editors in New York. So I lived in this blizzard of negativity. I have no idea why I kept going. I have no idea. I don't know how I did it. How would I go on? No. And then in 1979, 25 years later, Marilyn Johnson, God bless Marilyn, picked off the Esquire magazine slush pile. And Brooke and Grant, you know what the slush piles were like back in the day. Mm-hmm. At Esquire, it was, I'm not exaggerating, 5 feet tall. That's how tall the slush pile was. And there were 3 of them. So that's 15 feet of slush pile. And for some reason, Marilyn Johnson plucked this manila envelope. She didn't have anything to do. For about 2 minutes, opened it and said, damn. And they bought it. And that's all I needed to get my size 11 into a door of a magazine. And then I was just off and running. You just need a clip. You just need to say you're published. And that was it. That was it.
Well, and Esquire is a pretty darn good byline to start with. So yes. Exciting. I want to ask you about the tone of your writing, Eugene. The tone, especially of Not My Type, straddles, on the one hand, an account of the trial from your perspective, and it's a transcript of that trial. But on the other hand, it's written in a gonzo journalistic way that includes humorous commentary. So how did you decide to write in this tone when you could have just done it in a more standard journalistic way?
Oh my God. I was in the middle of a high comedy. Nothing is funnier than a trial, and nothing is more hilarious than Donald Trump. So my tone never changed. I came out of the womb writing this way. The first piece I did for Esquire, the second piece I did for Outside, Brooke had the same tone. It's all, I cannot force that tone down. And I write what I see, and I happen to have a comedic view of the world. That's how I see the world. Yeah. Many great writers see the world with a negative aspect, and they are great writers. And then you have people like George Eliot, who sees the comedy and the drama, so those are the great writers. I just merely see it as a comedy. And it also it keeps me happy when I'm writing. That's why the tone.
Oh, thank you, Eugene. And I wanted to mention we had Amanda Knox recently on our show just a couple months ago, and she said it had an interesting quote that I want to run by you. She said, "Dwelling is non-constructive, suffering with no dividends. It happens when we refuse to accept the life we actually have." And I don't feel like you're a dweller by nature, and yet you experienced the pain of having to live with this story for nearly 3 decades after it happened. So were you dwelling on it, or how did you deal with it before telling the world about it, both through the trial and this memoir?
No, I agree with Amanda. Even while you're dwelling, you're reliving the experience. And so you feel bad. You just feel bad. And I, unfortunately, even though I had an advice column for 27 years, many of the people who wrote to me were therapists with their problems. But I, of course, never been to a therapist, never went to a therapist. That was a mistake. I should have gone to a therapist after the attack because I could not admit that I suffered. Could not admit it. Would never admit it to myself. Wouldn't admit it to anybody because I come from, like many of your listeners, I come from a generation. Well, I come from the silent generation, born in World War II. And our whole thing is chin up, girl. You smile and you go on. That's what you do. You do never complain about a man, never, because then you look like a slut. You can't do it. So, yes, I suffered. I learned how to deal with it myself. And I did receive, because of the trials, Trump's attorney hired a therapist, a psychologist. So then we had to hire one. They wanted to prove that I was a nutball making up the whole story. And we needed to prove that the drama actually happened. So we hired Robbie Kaplan, the great legal mind of her generation, my attorney, hired Leslie Leibowitz. And Leslie Leibowitz is one of the world's leading trauma experts. And Leslie, she created the sexual assault protocol for the U.S. Air Force, for instance. And she ran the Harvard rape studies. She ran the Duke rape studies. This woman knows trauma. Leslie finally got me to center on what happened and how to deal with it. And so that was good.
I want to ask you about the focus on Trump's comment, not my type of woman. And you then decide to use that belittling comment as the book's title, thus giving it emphasis, and also a photo of you dressed stylishly and smiling. And it's impactful. And I also wanted to ask you about that choice and if you played a role in it, if that was what you wanted, if that was what the publisher wanted, if you could just tell us the backstory.
Well, as I was writing the book, of course, I came to the section where in 2019, when I came forward, Trump's reaction, first of all, he had 3 days from the White House calling me a liar. He called me a liar 26 times. On the third day, he said, as he was sitting behind the Resolute desk in the White House, she's not my type. So that was an amazing moment, particularly for the 24 women who had already come forward about Trump. So it stuck with me. Now, move ahead to 2022. Robbie Kaplan is deposing Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, getting ready for trial. He has said she is not my type so many times, okay? So Robbie says, I am about to show you a picture of E. Jean Carroll. Okay, she says that 3 times. 10 minutes later in the interview, she says, to Trump, can you please identify the people in this photo? And Trump looks at me and looks at the picture of me and says, that's Marla. That's my wife.
Wow.
He probably lost the case right there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It was, we put on 11 witnesses. So that, it so clinched it. It so cinched it. I opened the book. On page 1, it says, she's not my type. On page 2, it says, that's Marla, that's my wife. So there's my title. And it stands for everything every man has ever said for the last 4,000 years. What a powerful when a woman comes forward and accuses a powerful man, or not even a powerful man, any man. Are you kidding? She's, why would I touch that? You look at her.
So therefore, too, the image of you, this powerful image of you smiling, I mean, it seems to, kind of fly in the face of it. So, it's very intentional and it's evocative at the same time.
Well, St. Martin's chose the cover.
Mm-hmm.
And Jen Ederlin, the president of St. Martin's, they had, apparently, I wasn't there. I let them handle that. They know way more than I do. But apparently they had 5 or 6 photos laid out for possible cover. And Jen just pointed and said, look at that smile. That's the cover.
Perfect.
So, the cover was very important.
Well, Eugene, a big part of writing any memoir is dealing with its after effects, because all memoirs hold consequences, but yours holds more consequences than most, in part because of the nature of Trump's supporters. Like when you go up against Trump, there's this massive army of trolls out there poised to attack. And so has that affected your life in any way, or do you feel safe?
I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about you guys. Swear to God. I am worried. Right now, it feels like sort of the end of the world is coming. The world feels very shaky right now. I'm worried about women losing our rights over our own bodies. I'm worried about education. I'm worried about you. I'm not worried about me. I'm fine. I got my watchdogs out there. So I'm good. Also, I have a shotgun by my bed. So, we cannot be afraid. This is a time for every single one of your listeners who are, I think most of them have great understanding and are writers.
Mm-hmm.
Take it from me. This is not the time to try to feel safe. Now is the time to get up and resist Trump. And if your listeners are writers, please start writing on social media about your resistance to Trump. It will help.
Yeah. Speak truth to power and get your voice out there for sure.
Yeah, and don't be afraid. Jesus Christ, really, come on.
Well, I want to talk about how you structured the book. The trial weaves through your life as a way to explore your life, but then there's the trial itself. And the memoir of the trial is told from these different perspectives, especially because you do use the transcript as a narrative tool. And so I'm curious about that particular choice. I mean, it's very impactful. But when did you realize I need to really include these transcripts as part of the book?
Oh, Brooke, are you kidding? Have you seen a court transcript? It's comedy from the beginning to the end. It's also tragedy. It has everything in it. Court transcripts are gold. Not only did I have court transcripts, I had depositions. Every night during trial, I'd pick up my phone and I would put into my phone every single detail I could remember. What everybody was wearing, what they said, how they came in, with their demeanor in court. And that was all transcribed on Rev. I assume all your writers are, doing the same thing, making notes in their phone and then just turning it into Rev that has AI to do it for 25 cents a page or hour or whatever it is. And you get it back. And there are all my thoughts. So I had everything. Also, I had all the newspaper reports. I mean, from all those perspectives. And I had all the social media reaction. I had so much material. It was like eating pie as I was writing. It was the most wonderful experience to write this. And I suggest that when your listeners are sitting down to write their memoir, Nabokov said, you're very lucky if you have an actual letter from a woman you were in love with. Remember, he said that. He just said he would give a kingdom to have an actual letter. And your diaries are very key. And your journals are very key. But letters between your mother and father, et cetera, the key. Boy, real documentation. A memoir flies. And it's really, I could hardly contain myself. I mean, plus we had the photos.
Gold, like you said.
Yeah, gold.
Well, Eugene, in closing, I'm actually going to go back to the beginning of the book and the transcript, and I thought it was an interesting choice to start the book with your cross-examination by Trump's lawyer, and it was focusing on your romantic life and who you'd had sex with, and that, of course, is part of the rape defense template, to put a woman who's been sexually assaulted, on the defensive and in a state of public embarrassment. And of course, your looks were also on trial, and how you dressed, and you forefront all of this. So I wondered, just how, if embracing this and leading with it, it was part of reclaiming your story. We have the word reclaiming as kind of a theme for a lot of our discussions this year. So was that part of the reason to lead with all that and just dive into it?
It was such a warm and delicious moment during that deposition, because let me tell you, when you're deposed in a sexual assault trial, it is the worst. They can ask anything and they want the truth. You don't lie in a deposition. So it was mortally horrible. Then Alina Haba asks about my lovers. And I'm thinking, whoa, if there's one thing I love talking about, it's my lovers. And I was off and running. And it was my way of signaling to the reader, we're not putting up with this fucking bullshit, let me tell you. This is my side of things. So it was perfect to start the way with my lovers.
I love it, Eugene.
Also, one of my lovers came to my book party. Anthony Hayden Guest, who should be dead. Look him up, everybody. I don't know. He's close to 90. He comes straggling into the book party, looking good as ever. Anthony Anthony was a big time journalist in the 80s and 90s, and he went to every single party in New York, every single one, danced and drank every single one. I have no idea. He was famous. Well, Tom Wolfe used Anthony Hayden Guest as his center character in Bonfire of the Vanities. That's Anthony Hayden Guest, the journalist who wakes up with his head on the floor and can't. That's Anthony. So
he's on fumes, that guy.
Yeah. Oh, but he would be up every morning at 9:30 working, writing for Esquire, New York Magazine. And he actually came to the book party. So that was fun. Yeah, it was. That's the aftermath of a memoir. Is a wonderful second life for your life.
I wanted to say I'm really honored that you're here talking to us, and it makes me happy because I know the book has been out a little while and it still has interest. It's still provocative. It's, we're just thrilled to share this with our audience. So thanks for a great interview.
Oh, thank you, Brooke. I love being here.
Thanks for being fabulous, Eugene, especially fabulous in Eugene style.
Thank you. Thank you. I love talking to you guys. Loved it.
We'll be right back with today's book trend. Well, Grant, this week we are tackling a topic of great interest to authors, which is pre-orders. I host office hours for my authors once a week, and this topic comes up a lot. Notably, how soon should you start to solicit pre-orders and how to even do it, since most people are drumming up pre-orders on Amazon, and then some authors realize that maybe they don't want to drive all their readers to Amazon. So I'm curious, Grant, what is your personal experience with this, and what are some tactics that you personally have used to try to drive pre-sales?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of it right now with my book, Something Out There in the Distance, which is coming out January 13th, everybody. So please pre-order it. That's one tactic. But, timing is actually a question of mine because as I understand it, the more pre-orders you get, the more likely bookstores are to carry your book and the more likely your book will get reviewed. And so I've just been doing my best to get the word out. But, my book's launch keeps coming closer. It's only really 2 months away, so I feel behind. But here are some things I'm doing. My publisher gave me these snazzy little cards, about 1,000 of them. And so I'm trying to handwrite letters to people and send them. It's a great way to get back in touch with people and send them something personal. But it also feels kind of weird to ask people to buy a book in a letter when I haven't seen them in a while, So it's just different than like posting this global message on Facebook to buy the book. But I do plan to send at least one, maybe two big emails to everyone I know or so. And I'm just waiting for my good friend Patrick to finish making a trailer for the book, which I think will be super cool to feature that in an email. And then I'm trying to excerpt the book and keep it in front of people. I try to do one little excerpt or something about the book weekly on social media because I adhere to this principle that to get people to take action, it requires 7 touch points. That's an old marketing kind of principle. And then my publisher did a giveaway with Library Thing. For the last book, they did it with Goodreads. I'm also working with my publicist to get into some book festivals, and the publicist, she sent out the book for review, notably to Kirkus and Publishers Weekly. And and when I wake up, I try to send at least one email to someone to line up, some sort of awareness for the book. I might touch base with a bookstore I've done events with, or I might query a publication that I've written for in the past. Hope I'm doing it all right, Brooke. But I'm gonna have you tell me what kind of guidelines do you give your authors around timing and other things?
Yeah, I do usually say to start 3 months out. That's kind of the sweet spot in terms of when to really get the ball rolling. It could even be 2 months. The problem with starting to blast your potential readers with asks to buy your book too much earlier than that is that you are trying to build buzz. And 6 months is a long time for a consumer to wait, between the time that they pre-order something and then they get it. And so if somebody asks me, for instance, to purchase something that I'm not going to see for 6 months, it's a long window. 2 to 3 months is a little more tangible. Like, okay, it's coming soon, and you can talk about getting, your event on a calendar. You're trying to, build momentum, and you don't want that to be too long of a momentum because people just don't quite have that capacity to sustain the excitement for 6 months as opposed to maybe 2 months or 3 months out from publication. And then also pre-orders really do serve a particular function for publishers. If there are a lot of pre-orders, then that can impact how many books we print. And pre-orders are also good for authors because they signal demand to retailers, and then that helps distributors and sales reps advocate for the book.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I know when we were talking about this in preparation for today, you mentioned that what authors can actually drum up for pre-orders isn't really likely to have a great impact on what retailers will order. So can you say more about that?
Yeah, sure. The thing is that authors can get very focused on pre-orders, and I'm not saying they're not important. They are. It's just that they might move the needle less than what some authors imagine. Publishers and distributors play a much bigger role in determining the buys from retailers than authors can ever hope to do with their own pre-orders. And we do that with comps, and we do that, with our own feelings, feelings being the operative word, about what we think a book is going to sell based on a lot of factors. And so it does matter. I'm not trying to say at all that this is a wasted effort to try to drum up pre-orders, but I guess I see a wrinkle in the whole thing because the only place where author pre-order campaigns do move the needle is with Amazon. And then that creates a scenario where Amazon is the dominant player and force in the industry, which we already know, and of course has the consequences that it has. And I like my authors to try to work with their indie bookstores where possible because indies can and will do pre-order campaigns. And then that has the impact of supporting your local bookstore and not feeding the beast of Amazon. But it's a hard thing to convince authors to do because there's such a strong incentive to drive sales to Amazon. It helps your rankings. It gives a lot of authors that coveted #1 bestseller label that many of them are going for. And if you drive a lot of sales to Amazon, they will take big orders. Whereas if you drive a lot of sales to your local indie, they're just not going to re-up their orders in the same kind of volume that Amazon is capable of.
It's all super interesting, especially since I'm in the mix right now with this. And so 1, it's good to hear my time frame is still good. And 2, I've been guiding people to bookshop.org. I never use Amazon, but I obviously still have a lot of things to learn about this. So can you explain more about why driving sales to bookstores doesn't lift all boats? I was under the mistaken kind of idea that I thought all pre-order numbers were somehow available to everyone via BookScan. That's what influenced things.
Yeah, no, BookScan tracks through the register sales. So it does not track pre-orders. And so pre-orders really are what they sound like, which is how many books are being sent to retailers. And then the book scan numbers are the retailer's actual sale of those books, like cash register sales. So they are sort of different numbers. But let's say that you're driving everyone you know to order from your local bookstore. Okay, we think this is a good idea. And the bookstore can ship anywhere in the country, which is really great. So people in New York can order from a California bookstore. But then you think about like, how many people do you actually know that are going to do this? How many people do you actually think you can move to buy the book from your local bookstore? Grant, you and I live here in Berkeley. So let's say I tell everyone I know, buy from Book Passage here in the Bay Area. They'll ship to New York and Florida, Arizona, wherever. And then my friends and readers are going to have to pay a lot more for the book, first of all, because it's going to be not as discounted as it's going to be on Amazon. They'll have to pay for shipping when they probably have Prime on Amazon, so they wouldn't have to pay the shipping there. So let's say I could even manage to get 80 people to buy from Book Passage. Once Book Passage sells those 80 books, for which they will be grateful, like those sales are really wonderful for them, they're not going to order 80 more books and put 80 more books on their shelves. They might order 5 to 10 more and then try to sell them, but that's about the extent of it. Whereas Amazon, on the other hand, if you send 80 buyers to Amazon, like I said, it's cheaper for them. They can leave Amazon reviews, but Amazon will look at those. It will get the attention of their algorithms. So it's not human beings that are looking at those numbers. It's Amazon's algorithms, and they're going, 80 people just bought. So let's up our order from 150 to 400. Because they're able to react to the demand in that way. So that's how it works. Obviously, this is kind of complicated, but it's important for authors to understand because Amazon has really figured out how to beat bookstores at selling books. This is also why bookstores despise Amazon, by the way. And as a publisher, I'm conflicted about Amazon. I dare say, need them. I try to steer my authors toward understanding the broader ecosystem and not feeling like they're beholden to doing things in a way that only benefits Amazon. But of course, I understand its importance in the marketplace and the value of getting big orders there and reviews and rankings. And it's just got a lot more going on than any bookstore can hope to provide a single author. And that is just with the power of its algorithms and its landing pages and the sort of incentives that it drives to buy there.
There's always a lot to learn. It seems like life should be simpler, especially for authors. I guess this is going to be a new line for me in summing up my career. I can say I would have been a best-selling author, but I didn't use Amazon for ethical reasons. So, I'm mid-list at best. I'm joking, but I'm also comfortable with this because each of us needs the little bit of power we have to shape this world for the better. Eugene spoke to that in our interview, and Amazon has done a lot of destructive things. So I'll sacrifice a bit of my writing career success in the name of steering people to bookshop.org or my local indie. I don't want to end on a downer note, though, listeners. I want to say that it's been super fun to promote my book, a few months out, and I've been deeply touched by people who have ordered it, and I've had fun creating conversations around it and sharing it, and, it's just energizing to put my work out in the world. So I hope it's energizing for you to write and publish and promote your work. And keep listening to Memoir Nation, the podcast, and please join Memoir Nation, the community, the movement, the phenomena. We'll see you next week.